Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at J More Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your questions into the comment box and you'll see me turn my head and I will check from time to time and we'll ask Poppy whatever your question might be. Today's guest, whose name I just mentioned, is Poppy Tooker, a native New Orleanian who has spent her life immersed in the vibrant colors and flavors of her state. Her NPR radio show and podcast, Louisiana Eats, carries her message statewide and beyond. Her books document the old New Orleans recipes to current day drag queen brunch. She is Louisiana's ultimate cultural ambassador and culinary activist. Let's welcome Poppy.
Hello, Dara. Nice to see you.
It's good to see you. I always like to ask people when they're on the show, what's on your plate today beyond this show?
Oh, goodness. Well, Thursdays are media day in Poppy's life because aside from Louisiana Eats, I appear on the PBS affiliate here in New Orleans talking about, of course, food. Forgive my buddy, he might bark. And so the show's called Stepping Out, and I've been stepping out with them for about 15 of their 36 years. It's quite a storied show. And then this afternoon, of all things, at 4:30, I'm meeting Emerald's film crew at the Crescent City Farmers Market to talk about Creole cream cheese.
Well, I know you're a big advocate of the farmers market, and I think, didn't you co-write a book with Alice Waters about farmers market?
Well, I wrote this was my first book, the Crescent City Farmers Market Cookbook. Alice wrote the foreword to the book. And I've also been in some of Alice's farmer market kind of books that she's generated. But this was my first book, the Crescent City Farmers Market Cookbook. And it's all about the farmers market that brought farmers back to New Orleans after a long, long hiatus. And so they're about, the farmers market's over 25 years old here now. And so anyway,
Well, I did the farmers market. I'm jumping ahead of what I had, but the first time I had the opportunity to meet you was the Women's Chef and Restaurateurs Conference in New Orleans. It was 14 years ago. And I did one of the tours, which was the farmers market. And we started our morning off at the Vietnamese market and then just went to the different ones. I filmed a gentleman, and I was famous with my little camera, which you've already learned. And it was great. We went around and got to see really a good taste of what was down in New Orleans. What I don't want to bounce away from is Louisiana Eats, which is your NPR show that you produce and host. How long have you been doing that?
In June, it'll be 14 years. We will go into our 14th year in June.
And I've just been listening because I do listen to many, many podcasts when I'm out walking or in the car, and I love it. It's all food, and it's fabulous. But you did absolutely 2-hour episodes on king cakes. We just came off of Mardi Gras. And who knew that there was so much to say about king cakes?
Well, even folks in New Orleans didn't know, because it's funny how sometimes it takes an outsider to make us look at something. And basically, the pandemic did so many odd things for us. Thus, here we are on this virtual screen. I don't think this is something we might have been doing pre-pandemic. And one of the things that happened is that there were so many people who started their own cottage industries. And any bakery in New Orleans will tell you your king cake is your most important item because, believe it or not, most of New Orleans bakeries make their profit every year on king cakes. King cake season makes or breaks them. But aside from the bakeries, all sorts of people just popped up out the woodwork. And, with the help of Instagram, anybody can get an Instagram account and start showing their king cake on TV. And so it's incredible to people in New Orleans now that what, when I was a child, was merely a brioche dough ring with purple, green, and gold sugar on top is now this fantastical thing that often if is filled with all sorts of ingredients that you can get king cake flavor. King cake became a flavor somehow in the last 10 years. People think, I don't know, cinnamon is the king cake flavor, which I think is just ridiculous because originally that wasn't it. But anyway, king cake is a force of its own, and that's why it deserved 2 episodes during this last carnival season.
Well, you're very much involved with slow food, and your recent episode was 100 years of the camellia beans, about red beans and rice. Everybody, a good New Orleans, eats red beans and rice on Mondays.
Every Monday, every Monday.
And this was a variation on a red bean. Can you just give us a snippet to make people want to come back and listen to the episode?
Well, the camellia beans is the brand that for 100 years now, every New Orleanian favors because they actually have their own grade, the Hayward grade. The Hayward family has this recognized superior grade that's superior to USDA grade A. And because of the quality of their bean, because of their meticulous care that the dried beans are always fresh, their beans come out creamy and perfect every time. And so to celebrate their 100 years, this is such a remarkable company. What they did was they pledged 1 million bowls of beans to the Second Harvest Food Bank, which is our greatest food assistance program. And so that's how we covered their centennial, by telling the stories of the incredible good work that they are doing with that humble little red bean.
I want to tell people my first encounter with you, like I said, was at the Chef's Conference in New Orleans. And you did a panel with the late, great Leah Chase from Dookie Chase, and it was called Roux the Day. You were teaching the chefs how to make the perfect roux. And you said, not butter.
Oh, no, you can't make a Louisiana roux with butter. The butter will burn before the roux gets to the right color.
And the longer you can have it go, the better it is. But you said oil, or the best thing is the bacon fat.
Bacon grease. We all have a jar of it in our refrigerator.
I'm going to bring up another subject that you did during this, and we were talking, you call it the Creole mirepoix.
Mm-hmm.
Most people know it by the Holy Trinity.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that, and in processing, when your roux is the proper brown color and the proper thickness, you don't throw your Holy Trinity in there. You put the onions in first, and that's so it can release its flavors. I'm trying to remember
Well, the reason that you throw the onions in first, and it's a funny thing because if you read recipes, it's rare that in a recipe it's going to say add the onions first before the celery and the bell pepper. And this is something, if you didn't learn it from your grandmother or your great grandmother, often you don't know. And the reason is that you cook that roux depending on what you're cooking and what your personal taste is. But the darkest roux you're going to ever get to without burning will be a milk chocolate brown. And you get that roux to the milk chocolate brown color, which is, of course, just a combination of oil and flour cooked until it reaches that color. You have those onions all chopped up and ready to go, and you throw them into that milk chocolate brown roux, and the roux gets darker and it goes from milk chocolate brown to bittersweet chocolate brown. And then it's safe to go ahead and add the celery and bell pepper. It's the high concentration of sugar in those onion juices, because we're not caramelizing the onion. You don't brown the onions in the roux. You just let them exude their natural sugars and the roux gets darker. And then it's safe to go ahead and add the watery chopped celery and bell pepper.
That panel, it was so fascinating. I was telling Jen, the producer, I said, I go to the conferences and especially a panel after lunch. I said, I've been known to fall asleep. It's just one of those. But everybody was hanging on every word between you and Leah Chase. And you had explained why you were using green peppers instead of carrots. And I'm just going to throw that back to you. So
that's because the classic French mirepoix, of course, is onion, celery, and carrots. But in Louisiana, down here in New Orleans, we're painfully aware of being at least 7 feet under sea level in almost every place in this city. That's why we have those above ground graves, because you can't dig a grave in this city. And in a city where you can't dig a grave, how are you going to grow a carrot? So those initial French folks who settled here, they had a real problem about carrots because the water table's so high. And I personally believe that, on the other hand, peppers in this tropical environment, they grow like weeds. And so I believe that that's how the carrot came out and the pepper went in to what's really the Creole mirepoix.
I think you said that the green peppers are volunteers, that you see them growing out of the cracks in the pavement.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I've never seen a bell pepper growing up out of a crack in the pavement, but I have seen lots of little bird's eye peppers, those little hot, hot, hot peppers that are similar to the cayenne pepper or any of those hot peppers they're making hot sauce with. And I've seen a lot of people still have those in their gardens, and I've seen lots of those little plants volunteering.
Right. And you had talked about, I love this, the good mother smell.
Well, the good mother smell is, we're in early March, and I think it was 86 degrees in New Orleans yesterday. And so almost year round, certainly before air conditioners were very prevalent, there's awnings and screen windows and screen doors on all the raised houses in New Orleans. And you would walk home from school as a child in the afternoon, and rolling out that back door, that kitchen door, you'd smell the good mother smell. And that good mother smell was often a roux cooking with the onions and all of that sensory pleasure, except on Mondays. And that good smell would be the red beans simmering on the stove.
Going back to the conference, because you just so impressed me and I've learned so much that I'm really grateful that you're sharing time. And I have to watch it here because I know you have to move on to your next show, which is Stepping Out, which is the PBS show that you do on a weekly basis. We did breakfast. We came into conference one morning and Leah Chase was serving one thing across the aisle from you, and you were doing kala kala.
Yeah, kala. Kala la 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 la.
You were almost singing a song.
Well, that's because that, everybody comes to New Orleans and they think that they have a beignet and some cafe au lait and that they've done it. But the truth is that there's something much older than the beignets and even better than the beignets, and that's rice kala. This is a dish that if you go to Ghana or Liberia today, you'll find women in the open air markets making kala. And if you ask them, what is that? In the Bantu tongue, the native tongue of the region, they'll say kala. Well, this is a dish that made the trip across the Atlantic Ocean in the minds and hearts of the enslaved rice growing peoples from Africa. And when it got here, it got to be such an important part of the fabric of New Orleans culture because we've got to go back to before New Orleans was part of the state of Louisiana. We've got to go back to the time before the Louisiana Purchase when the city was ruled by the Code Noir. And the Code Noir laid out all the regulations for how the white people, the black people, and the free people of color lived in the city. And it was required that slaves have a day off. And on the slaves' day off, many of them would go into the streets and would become street vendors. Many of them were Kala vendors. And they would go through the streets of New Orleans and they'd call out, Kala, Kala. Belle Kala to show, madame, belle Kala to show, which means beautiful Kala is very hot. So that song is the street call. And it was a very important dish, so important, in fact, that we know for certain that because there was also in the Code Noir something that said if a slave came to you, demanded his price, and could pay it, you were required by law to take his money and let him go. I'm not saying that's what happened 100% of the time, but what I am saying is surely the proceeds from the sale of that precious Kala that those enslaved people brought in their minds and hearts from Africa, those proceeds undoubtedly bought freedom for some of the Kala vendors and their families. So something that has that much social significance and is delicious is certainly a lot better and more than just an old beignet.
Right. And just to let people know, that's a fried rice fritter.
Yeah, it's a cake. It's a fried rice cake. You make them like as if you were making quenelle, so they go from spoon to spoon. So they're little, they're shaped about like this. And anybody who's curious and wants to find the recipe can go to poppytooker.com. And there's a recipe section, and you'll find not only the traditional sweet version that gets served sprinkled with powdered sugar, but also the savory version that is something I started doing back in the early 2000s when I was trying to promote and get people to eat those kala to save them.
They were so good, I kept hanging around to eat them. They were delicious. So much you want to talk about. And as you said, Poppy's information is floating up in the comment section. Anything you want to know about Poppy is poppytucker.com. All the links, the recipes. Let's see, Poppy, I love Cajun. Let's see. I love Cajun and Creole cuisine from Louisiana. You were making me hungry.
Thank you.
Yes, Randy saying fried rice with sugar. Yes, Randy, fried rice with sugar.
No, it's not fried rice with sugar. It's rice, leftover rice, combined with flour and sugar and eggs that forms a very tight batter. And it's that batter that gets fried.
Okay.
If you Google me on YouTube, I'm pretty sure, I know I'm making a roux on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be someplace I'm making kala.
And it brings up a good question, and I'm sure you've asked this before. What is the difference between Cajun and Creole?
Cajun and Creole are when we're talking food, it has to do with they both have a basis in French food and in African food so much as we're learning today. But Creole, the word Creole comes from the Spanish word criollo, which means native. So the first Creoles were the first offspring of the French and Spanish settlers who came to New Orleans, mostly settled down in the French Quarter. That's why it was called that. And those first offspring became the folks we first knew as Creoles. The Cajuns, on the other hand, that comes from Acadian, and the Cajuns also were a French speaking people who came from Nova Scotia, originally from France, then burned out of their villages after the French Indian War, ended up down in South Louisiana because of the very sympathetic French climate. And they settled out in the swamplands and the bayous. They were not city dwellers. So, a very easy way to understand Creole versus Cajun is that the Creoles are the city folks. The Creole food is the food of the city. It's often heavily seafood based, and it's well seasoned, but it's not hot and spicy like the Cajun food is. Cajun food tends to be much hotter and spicier, probably because of food safety. Those were poor people before refrigeration. The peppers, antiseptic effect on your stomach so you don't get sick. Cajun food is typified by pig and chicken. Creole food, seafood. Not just seafood food, of course, because there's lovely dishes like griots and grits. That's a Creole dish. Both cultures have gumbo, but the Cajun food, one pot cooking with chickens and pigs, heavily spiced and hotter than the food you find in the city.
I want to remind people that you can listen to Louisiana Eats if you're doing Apple or any of these different programs. I will let you know, since I'm a Google person and not an Apple person, there is Google Podcast. It costs you nothing. Just type in Louisiana Eats and you can download all the different shows that Poppy does. And if this show hasn't proven how enthusiastic and how much she cares about the food, and she's wonderful to listen to. I'm not prejudiced, can I say? I'm watching the time here, so I'm going to ask some of the typical questions that I ask at the end of the show. But I do have one that I added that I didn't advise you on, and I heard it on another podcast, and I thought it was a good question, so I'm going to ask you. With the foods from New Orleans, Creole, Cajun, in that area, what dish is overhyped, and is there one that doesn't get enough hype?
Well, gumbo and jambalaya, everybody seems to think they know about that. Etouffee is probably something that would give a lot of people a question mark, that they think it's terrible when they serve an etouffee, which is a stew dish. Both Creole and Cajun have etouffees in their cuisine, but it's really, I believe, a Cajun word. The Cajuns didn't go to school much. They were poor people scraping a living off the land. In France, there's culinary verb étouffée, which means to smother. And so all an étouffée is a dish that is cooked in its own gravy with a lid on it. And so it's easy to understand that the Cajuns, they remembered great grandmère. She made a étouffée. They have this memory, but they don't know how to spell it. Easily becomes etouffee. And that's probably a dish that would make people scratch their heads a little bit. You often see shrimp etouffee, crawfish etouffee, chicken etouffee. It's delicious. Order it.
Okay. And for anybody who is down or going to be in New Orleans, this weekend, it's the book festival at Tulane University. And Poppy, as we mentioned, has written a book called The Drag Queen Brunch, and they're going to have one down there.
Drag Queen Brunch.
I heard there's a special invite to the Attorney General Jeffrey Landry to come.
Oh, I do hope he comes. I really do. But yeah, that was my most recent book, and the book's filled with both lifestyle shots and oh, there's the girls on the pink balcony at Brennan's. But it's also filled with delicious brunch recipes from people from restaurants, famous restaurants. Everybody's in the book. Antoine's, Commanders, you name it, they're all in the book. And if anybody's coming to the Tennessee Williams Festival, which is I think the 23rd through the 26th, on Saturday, the 25th, we're also having a major drag queen brunch called a drag brunch named Desire in honor of Tennessee Williams. And it'll be at the Bourbon House on Saturday, March the 25th.
Right. So I'm going to rip through these. Your ultimate culinary fail.
Oh, pralines make me very nervous. I'll be honest. I'm supposed to have come out the womb making pralines, but in this hot, humid weather, candy making is sometimes tricky and makes me nervous.
Well, I think you said when we talked before the show that baking's not your thing. You've joined me as the frustrated baker.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Your best bite this week.
Oh, I'm married to a hunter. And so I always have a lot of venison. And I have perfected the art of using venison to make what we call Creole daube, which is the meat cooked in a red Creole gravy. And with that Sicilian influence that's so heavy here in New Orleans, we eat it over fusilli or curly pasta. So all the bits of that Creole daube break up and get tender and get in between the layers of those. It's one of my favorite things in the world.
That's great. If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Relax. It's going to all be okay. And do exactly what you're doing. Just follow your heart.
If you could wake up tomorrow morning with a new talent, what would the new talent be?
I'd like some math skills. I'm good with words, bad with numbers.
I don't know, it struck me funny. Most people say sing, dance, whatever, but I never heard math skills.
Well, I'd like some. I remember the terror of second grade when I could not quite handle the multiplication tables, and forget about division. It's a miracle I got out of school.
I'm with you there. And to wrap up and just saying, this has been lovely and I could talk forever, but everyone just remind you, Louisiana Eats, just punch it in for your podcast or go to Poppy's website because she has links to it and audio there for you to listen to. What question didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
I don't know. I really don't know, Dara. I don't have one for you. If we had forever to talk, I would tell you that follow your heart part. You know, I was in love with the man that Daddy threatened to send to jail 50 years ago. And like a miracle, he reappeared in my life after a miserable, very long marriage. And now I'm married to the love of my life who appeared about 7 years ago. I'm a newlywed. So
that's fabulous. Fabulous. I want to interject something. There's a Baltimore woman, she's an attorney, Marlene Tressman, and she grew up in a Jewish orphanage down in New Orleans. And she wrote a book about an attorney who has not been recognized. And she's just done another one about the New Orleans orphanage. I'm going to get you the information because she has a new book coming out and might be something interesting for the TV show that you do for PBS.
I'm going to show you something that in that same Jewish vein, if people are interested in learning more about the Jewish South, This is one of the most interesting books that I have read in memory. The Sugar King Lay on God Show. And it was written by his great, great, great grandson, Peter Wolf. It's a fabulous book. The interview isn't on Louisiana Eats yet, but it's coming probably in the next month. So, The Sugar King. Great book.
The information on Marlene Tressman.
Gotcha.
I wish you only the best, good health. I thank you so much. And this was an interview that surely did not disappoint. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dara.
Well, have a great day.
Next time in person.
I'm there.
Yeah.
All righty, everyone. Next week's guest is Mariko Amakadomo. That was a mouthful. And in her words, she is connecting the world through culinary experiences. The show will be live from Prague, where this world traveler is hosting culinary experiences that encompass her time in Hollywood, Vietnam, and India. As before, if you need to reach me, you can reach me. My email is food@jmoreliving.com or my Instagram account, which is @DaraCooks. All shows are immediately archived in video form on JMOR's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. Feel free to dig into our video archives of past shows. We truly appreciate it when you share our show with friends and family. May your plates always remain full. I will see you next week. Thank you.